Hi Tommy, thanks for coming in today for letting me have this interview in terms of my research.
Thank you.
So first question, are you aware of the 5 stages of grief?
I am, surprisingly. I have done psychology at a GCSE level, and the plan will be at some point to progress to a university qualification on the same basis. So yes, I am fully aware. From the acts of denial, working our way through from the anger, the bargaining, even the depression, and then of course we end with the acceptance. It is all basics, but I can go further than that by saying denial, the acceptance that what you're seeing is not real, as if it wasn't believing. And then you've got your second one, which is the anger, rage and fury, because you're not accepting from what has been shown directly upon you. And then you've got your bargaining. Well, you will do anything, and I mean anything, for this not to happen. As in, you will try your hardest to believe and want things to change. And then of course we have the depression, which we have all gone through at one stage in our lives. Depression to the point where the heart breaks and the body shivers. But after all this, eventually there is some semblance of acceptance where the heart and the mind can finally accept the loss that has taken place.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tommy. You did mention you're a psychology student,
That is
so have you experienced or witnessed it firsthand?
Well, it's quite fascinating, because being a psychiatry student, and the reason why one wishes to be so is due to the fact that one struggles with emotion in the first place. So trying to say that have I experienced it firsthand is a metamomer. However, experiencing it from others, I certainly have. Especially when you turn up at a funeral and people are grieving, having to understand that in its entirety and all the denial of what is being taking place. Not to mention that as a psychiatry student we go through all this. We go through maybe not the 5 stages of depression directly, but emotion as a whole. From the acceptance when one has been killed, or the acceptance from family. It is all wrapped into one bow, and that is emotion.
But do you agree that obviously with the 5 stages of grief, do you agree that they all happen at once, or do they unfold separately?
I think it depends on the person, and I believe it always depends on a few factors. Now, if you're a believer in Freud, you're looking at more of a something that's happened internally, as in it's natural, it's going to happen throughout. Or you can go further and it's a stage progression. As in, if you're depending on your upbringing and, depending on your development stage, you could be experiencing it in stages. But I do believe what really happens in reality is the stage is different to each person. For instance, there are people who say having their wife die, never accept it, and commit suicide in grief because they can't accept it. Not to mention that it all comes down to a simple point. We're all different. It's that simple, really.
Yeah, so you mentioned obviously the example of someone losing their wife and not being able to accept it.
Yeah.
Do you believe that substance abuse could be a massive factor, especially with, anger and depression, and especially denial being, stages of grief? Do you believe it could send you down that path more
Definitely.
or less?
More likely, most individuals will turn to alcohol, this is true. But other drugs certainly are vices. Whether those vices are any good, well, that's up to the person to decide. But typically speaking, anger and drinking is an issue. However, there is cases where some will use drugs like MDMA and cocaine. Why? Because it rapids the heart and it gets them pumping and it gets them forgetting, even just for a moment. When they're at that high point of pure relief is where they wish to be.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that. So obviously, would you say that each stage of grief has a different impact. So like, do you think they build, or do you think that they come at different times?
Referring to my previous answer, I do believe that it happens individually to the individual and their traumatic events that has happened in their lives. But absolutely, it can happen on stages. It certainly can, and those stages can evolve and transcend those stages of grief and horror. The real question is not whether those stages have different impacts or ranges, it's the impact upon itself. Those impacts upon the way we feel and the way we act dictate who we are as an individual. Take the character within the play that you're creating. This individual is going through incredible grief and pain, and this individual is deciding to use drugs to overcome this incredible horror. The real question is not whether she should. The real question is, does it help her or him, depending on whom we're talking about.
Yeah, as you said, as for the character I am writing, it all depends on the outcome and where I want to take that story and that character development. But as you mentioned earlier, you have Asperger's.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, like, you struggle with emotions. So as a person with Asperger's, and I don't want to be too personal here, do you find it hard to pick up on stages of grief? So like, could you, because you don't feel as much emotion as you would as say someone like myself, is there a difference in how you receive and perceive?
Yes, absolutely. The big one is body language. I struggle immensely when we're talking about body language. If there's a cue for when it comes to violence or depression or anger, it goes right over my head, as if that didn't happen. The emotion needs to be extreme for me to notice. For instance, if someone's dealing with something inside, and most people are like, well, they're dealing with something, especially, but I don't even notice. For personally, to me, when we're talking about depression and denial, those type of things I can't see. I need to be told. Then I can provide emotional support if necessary. Poorly, because my emotional support truly is. But the real question is not whether it's the fact that I'm doing it. But getting back to the question, do I notice other stages? Anger, when it's eventually boiled over and one has become annoyed, I obviously notice that. But I am terrible at trying to bring down the situation. As myself, I rarely get angry myself because anger is hard to control by its definition. Bargaining on the same turn goes right over my head completely. The idea that one can bargain for their own, happiness, it doesn't excite me. And then we've got acceptance. Accepting something's happened, to me, that's the stage that I basically try to get to. If other people are in that state, that's obviously the stage we want to get to. The real question is, how long does it take? I know people who have never accepted some loss in their house, especially when it comes not just for, as I mentioned before, a husband and his wife, stillbirths or miscarriages, and the way emotion is wrapped up to the point of they do not accept and just stay in denial for most of their lives, if not the entirety of their life, because they believe that life existed, when from a scientific perspective, most don't.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tommy. This helps me a lot in terms of my research for my upcoming film, Rush by Light. I'll keep you updated. Thank you for definitely, allowing me, taking the time out to help me conduct this interview today.
By all means.
So, thank you, and I'll speak to you soon.
I'd love that. Thank you very much.